So moving forward, you want to verify first that your design output meets the design requirements once you've had that freeze. So that's a space called design verification. And your goal is basically focused on those quantitative elements that we were talking about. You know, how are those outputs meeting the inputs? How are we testing them to show that they are meeting the requirements? So, you know, for this device, we're going to be seeing a range of specific, you're going to be doing product builds, you're going to be measuring the products in a variety of ways that you'd already identified when you developed your outputs. You'll be doing, in some cases, just things that start looking a little more qualitative inspection versus quantitative measurement, where you can't do quantitative measurements. You'll be doing a lot of data analyses to ensure that things are within confidence ranges that you've determined would be acceptable from a control standpoint, that are dependent on the criticality of each of those design elements. So that's the design verification. The other element that you do once you've completed that is you then do what's called the design validation. And so if you've shown that your design outputs will meet your design inputs, in theory, what you should get is a medical device that meets your user needs, but you still need to show that it does. And because we're talking more qualitative, we're talking about some different assessment methods than you talk about under verification. So while verifications will be a lot of test methods that are validated and numbers and data analyses, validation methods are more focused on use simulations. You might have a bench anatomic model that you might want to run the product through and show that with a certain number of products you can get it in. You might bring physicians into your lab and show that they can do that. You might just hand your product to users, and you're probably going to want to have a range of users. I had an issue once where we had to go in and recall and redesign a product that was designed because they had, I think it was when it was launched, they brought in like 4 or 5 physicians and had deployed it into a model, and it worked fine, but then when they started putting it in the hands of wider range of physicians, they saw that some doctors were just jamming that thing in there, and the whole delivery device would just collapse and make the product unusable. So, you know, you want to bring in a range of users there to make sure that, yep, they can do what you need them to do. They can use it without breaking it or creating other unexpected or undesirable issues. You might be doing some preclinical work. You might do an animal functional study to show that your device will treat something that is considered a reasonable comparator to a human disease. And really, clinical trials should be considered a form of a design validation. They're a direct form. You know, you actually measure the effect of the device. And for most devices, you're typically not doing a clinical trial unless you just can't answer the question around, will it do what I need it to do, using the other methods. So because a lot of devices will come to market following the 510K equivalence method, that, you know, they're typically pointing to, at some point, some clinical experience through use simulations, user evaluation, preclinical studies. But if you're developing something that's so new that you don't know if you can really make that leap with confidence, then you'll do a clinical trial as well. And there might be times, depending on what you're doing, even if the regulations may not be saying we want to see a clinical trial, you may want to go get one. I was in a situation where we were commercializing an embolic device, and we decided we wanted to be able to say that you could use it for uterine fibroids. And prior devices never really had that specified as an indication. The decision was made that the value would be worth it to run a clinical trial to go after that indication, even though the FDA was not saying you have to have that indication to come to market. So sometimes you make that decision strategically because you've thought of validating, you want to validate the use in a specific way so that you can really focus and advertise in that way.